President Trump recently went on the attack against his own Federal Reserve chairman. That's Jerome Powell. And this happened during an interview with Fox Business's Maria Bartiromo.
And they have Draghi, who is, we should have Draghi instead of our Fed person.
Yeah.
Draghi, as you know, last week he said lower interest rates and we're going to stimulate the economy. They're going to put money into the economy. They're going to force money into the economy because Europe is doing, okay, but they're not doing great. And with us, we have a Fed that keeps raising interest rates. I mean, you explained that one. And this was not what I thought we had. But not only are we raising, I've had 9 interest rate hikes. Obama had nothing. He had cheap money. So my economy is far better than Obama's economy. Obama's economy was ready to crash. You couldn't do anything. The rules and regulations, which I've gotten rid of, I have great rules and regulations, but they're reasonable. Under Obama, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't do a Keystone pipeline. You couldn't do anything.
Right. Well, the regulations were.
The whole country, right.
Yeah.
But Maria, now we're really rocking and rolling. My problem is that as they reduce their currency in order to take advantage of the United States, we have a man that doesn't do anything for us.
Yeah.
We're sitting there and we stay. He should have never raised the rates to the level that he raised them.
Well, he said he's not going to get pushed around by political. He said, he basically suggested yesterday, I'm not going to get pushed around.
He's trying to prove how tough he is because he's not going to get pushed around.
Yeah.
Here's a guy, nobody ever heard of him before, and now I made him, and he wants to show how tough he is. Okay, let him show how tough he is. He's not doing a good job.
Wow. Do they ever talk about business on Fox Business? I know this supposedly was a discussion on interest rates. And by the way, Draghi, right? So let me just give you some context here. Mario Draghi is the president of the European Central Bank, right? So now the situation in Europe is different than in America. America kind of has, we have the reserve currency. And they have a different financial situation in Europe than we do actually in America. So he's like, no, let's do what Europe does. Let's do what Draghi does and print lots of money and inflate the economy, right? By cutting interest rates. Well, look, what might work in Europe, it's going to work here. Okay? But first, look, I love through this entire interview, and if you watch it, he just continuously just steamrolls over Maria Bartiromo. It's hilarious. But overall, this is what happens, right? Like Jerome Powell was chosen by Donald Trump because Donald Trump thought he's going to do whatever I want. And now what Donald Trump wants is to continue cutting interest rates. But I want more cheap money. I need more cheap money. Why is that? Well, because it inflates values. Now, I'm going to explain. And look, but first, the reason that, of course, they're not doing the rate cuts is because it'd be stupid. And number two, the Federal Reserve is actually showing that they're independent than with the government, right? They're showing that independence. But why is Trump demanding these rate cuts? He believes, because he just said it, that the stock market, and by the way, he's using the Dow Jones Industrial Average to make this this decision, right? He said it would be 10,000 points higher if Powell were not the chairman of the Federal Reserve and if he would continue to cut rates. 10,000 points. What, did you just pull that out of the air? Like, where did you pull that number out of? It'd be 10,000 points higher. I mean, again, okay, so say Jerome Powell wasn't part of the Fed, right? And they put in someone else. Would that other person also cut interest rates? Would they follow Donald Trump? Well, if they actually know what they're doing, they would not. Now, look, I'm no economist, right? But normally, the time that you would cut interest rates is when the economy is bad in order to try to help boost investment, right? Now, that would seem to be at odds with what he said before, that the economy is, we're doing great, right? We're rocking and rolling. But wait a minute, if we're rocking and rolling, then why do you need to keep interest rates low? Uh, Look, that just allows, of course, companies to borrow incredibly cheap money. Now, who benefits from borrowing incredibly cheap money? Oh, right, people like Donald Trump and his businesses. See, that's what this is about. Of course it is. But he says that keeping interest rates low is going to boost the economy, it's boost the stock market. In reality, it would boost profits for companies that do, for example, construction and building projects, real estate. Again, like Donald Trump. But he also thinks that the stock market, of course, represents the entire economy. As he said before, the stock market is great. We're doing tremendous in the stock market. But that's not the entire economy. And that's the mistake that, look, not just Donald Trump makes, but a lot of people make, actually. They say, oh, if the stock market is strong, that means the economy is strong. No. I mean, look, if you have investments, like, for example, 401ks, and you have a good stock market, well, then, okay, maybe you are doing pretty good then. But if you don't have those, like millions of Americans, then you're not going to see any improvement in your situation. I mean, look at the, job numbers, for example. So job numbers, Donald Trump can come in and he says, and can say, and he actually has said, that job numbers are great. Oh, man, again, unemployment, so very, very low, right? Okay, well, that's just a continuation from the Obama years, right? And so it hasn't really seen a bump from Trump's tax cuts or anything that he's done. It's just a natural progression. And now, of course, Donald Trump goes and takes credit for that progression and says, oh, me. No, but you barely did anything. You cut taxes for yourself and corporations from 35 to 21%, which, drastically cut government revenue, increased deficits, etc. Which, by the way, I thought the deficit was, you talked to right-wingers during the Obama years. The deficit, it's strangling businesses. No, it's actually not. Not at all. But anyway, no, this has been steady, right? And look, you've had some wage increases, right? But of course, wage increases have barely just outpaced inflation. We're not necessarily losing ground. We're not really gaining a whole lot of ground either. I think for the majority of Americans, we're still seeing wages fairly flat, fairly stagnant, while, of course, a lot of this wealth concentrates at the top. Now, the result of the Trump tax cuts, as I continue to explain over and over and over again, is that it all went to the wealthy. They ended up buying back their own stocks. They put money back into their own pockets. They didn't raise wages. In fact, some executives have pointed out, like, no, if you don't understand, we can't give that money to our workers because our shareholders expect bigger returns. So we're just going to take that money that we save from taxes and give it to our shareholders. It's not going to go to the employees. In fact, we're incentivized to not give it to our employees. Now, what happens when you have all these stock buybacks? Well, you end up having, of course, an artificial inflation in stock values. They're not creating more value. They're not worth more. The company's not doing better. No, it's just executive stock prices are just inflated. It becomes a bubble. They're not sharing that profit with the workers. Now, that, of course, has bad implications and will actually turn out quite badly. As CNBC explains, the problem with that is that artificial pumping stock values to lofty heights without a corresponding increase in earnings would pose a significant risk to the economy. And they point out how the last time stock prices were really high as what Donald Trump is trying to get the Dow Jones average up to, which is about 4,000, the market collapsed and the economy fell into recession. Why? It's because we had a gigantic speculative bubble that ended up bursting. Again, I'm not an economist, so I can't say for sure, but I think that I know enough that when an economy becomes too top-heavy, as ours have, that it tends to fall over. I mean, have we learned nothing from the Bush era, where we gave giant tax cuts for the rich, and by the way, allowed them to repatriate a ton of money at very, very low tax rates, which is what the Trump administration did again, and it had no impact on job creation. In fact, it had a negative impact. The more that you look into it, the more jobs were shed after tax cuts, after these crazy repatriation, right? I mean, Bush era, we gave giant tax cuts. In the Clinton era, we did deregulation of the banks. What did we get for our efforts? A short-term sugar high where some people at the top made a ton of money, and then a global financial recession. And of course, these banks got bailed out by the taxpayer. But I guess Donald Trump's not exactly worried about that because either he's literally too stupid to realize it, or he doesn't care because if the Fed cut interest rates, then he can borrow money. His businesses can borrow money from the Federal Reserve much more cheaply than before. And I think when you're looking at Donald Trump, when you're looking at the baby in the White House, you realize all he cares about is himself and his own wealth. That is the sad, sad reality of the Trump administration. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.